a large, maybe not a large concern, but something that is an acute concern.
So with that said, would we be safe to say that is there a test for our children that could be taken to see if they in fact have these levels? And if so, if not, and their levels show low, would this be something that would actually build over time in a long term, with something that wouldn't show up now but could possibly show up in the future?
Well, PCB, is a test, to answer your question. There's a blood test and a urine test that you can do for PCBs. You will find PCB in almost every person, because 65% of the body burden of PCBs comes from foodstuffs, like fish oil. If anybody takes fish tablets or fish oil tablets, or eats fish, salmon, trout. So it's a little difficult from the blood levels to know what is a normal level, because there isn't any normal level. You probably shouldn't have any there, but you do get some from just environmental exposure. So there is the test that can be done.
But we would say that would be an average if if normal individuals take that in with eating fish and different things of that nature. There should be a level that would rise above that if you had the normal levels plus the exposure, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it varies from one population to another depending on their dietary habits. So I'm sure there's numbers in the literature that specify some of those.
Okay, great, perfect.
And I think, just to answer that question a little bit further in terms of our situation, we live in a region, New Bedford being one of them, where we know that stuff has been around. So I'm sure we've all picked up some of it. What the EPA is trying to do is say, hey, if you find them, what would be a reasonable idea of trying to reduce the exposure? So they put these limits, and they make some assumptions. And that's why I said, 180 days, 6.5 hours a day, times X number of years, in the same place. So when they talk about that, they're not talking about whether it's this room or that room or the other room. They're talking overall exposure over the whole year, the whole day, every day of that school year. So there is something you can do in terms of if you really want to calculate, how many hours does a kid spend in this room versus that room. We could do that. We rather go after reducing whatever places we find that are above those thresholds and try to bring them down.
Which I think is great, and I commend you for moving forward, because at this point I think we would all agree that as long as our children are safe at this point, that we can work anything out in the future. Things happen. But again, I think my concern is that although I think it's conducive to do that type of cleanup, we also need to make sure that there hasn't been harm done thus far. That's my concern as a parent.
And to be honest, from the stuff that I've read, there's very limited studies that have been done on people, other than some of the ingestion studies because of what people eat. So I'm not sure that I don't think we can give you that answer.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Hi, Dr. Colley. Scott Jasparro. I have 3 kids in the school system. 2 of them are in a middle school. The EPA said that you don't test unless you're moving something or disturbing, basically. My question, I have 2 questions, actually. The first one is, if nothing's been disturbed, apparently that stuff's been breaking down and getting into the air somehow. So it's in the ventilation system already. You had said earlier that one of your options were, if you do open the school, that you'd have all the windows open in the winter, and you'd have the heat blasting. Would the ventilation system, which apparently must have it in it because it's pushed all the air around the school, either be replaced or cleaned, or how would you go about doing that?
Just so we're clear, we're not just opening the windows all year long. No. What I meant was it'd be analogous to you doing that in your house.
Yes.
Yes, all the ventilating units would be clean, all the ductwork would be clean, but the issue is after you do that is how much outside air gets brought in, how much inside air gets shut out. So we can regulate those units, and they have these computer systems that control how much air from the outside, how much air from the inside gets mixed in. So we can open it up to bring more outside air to try to vent out the contaminants so that the kids are not sitting in a room with more contaminants than should be there. So if we can vent it out, that is one of the ways that, for example, Lexington did that. They went around and rejiggered all of their machines. If you go into the rooms, there's usually on the outside walls, you'll have a unit that actually has a vent to the outside to bring in and air out. So those are the ones we're talking about. In the inside rooms, they go through the roof.
But the actual vents themselves and the whole system would
Those
probably
would
be
be clean.
Contaminated, so
Well,
those would be all cleaned. You
Yeah,
don't
and
want
it's
to push
part
them on
of
the
why
same
I put up there the caulking removed near ventilating.
Yeah.
There's some places where the vents that are picking up the air are right next to where the windows have the caulk. So, we're going to try to remove some of that as we do these tests to see if that works. Then we're going to replicate that in the other rooms so it doesn't keep picking it up. And again, it's part of the management, the risk management plan would be to maintain the units clean, do it over time, continue to test. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. The other question I had logistically, I moved to Westport. One of the big reasons was for the school system. And I'm sure a lot of people here want to keep their kids in Westport. One of the options that I thought of, I'm sure a lot of other people did too, and I'm sure you did, but what about the high school if we split the day that way and let the kids go later in the afternoon? Or, it's only down the street from the middle school, so logistically it'd probably be a lot easier to bring the stuff here. And that way the kids won't be leaving Westport.
We did kick that around. Like I said, no matter which one we choose of all the options that we put in front of the school committee for us to decide, there's going to be issues with it. If you go that route, you are going to have issues. I know somebody asked about what happens after school. You're going to have that issue. You're going to have the issue of either high school kids getting up really early. What do you do with the kids while they're waiting to come to school because they're not coming in until the afternoon? How late do they stay? When do they do homework? Do they do homework in the morning, come to school? And let's put it this way, it is going to disrupt the life of both schools if we do that, because it's not just the middle school that's going to be disrupted, it's going to be the high school as well, because you're still going to try to get all those classes in, and it's going to mess up the schedule. So no matter how we do it, now we're affecting 900 kids or almost 1,000 kids instead of 550. Okay. But it is one of those things we did think about.
Hi, I know you. Yeah, I'm sorry. My daughter had one question is there a way to know exactly which classrooms were high? Is there a list posted for which classrooms were high?
I just want to check my cheat sheet.
Just so I know.
We did,
is there a way to find it?
And they're by number. So once I can post these.
Okay.
But the problem is, to be honest, I go more by what teacher. That's how
Which
I
is fine, because I think the
things.
kids do the same thing. If you let them know whose class.
What you'll get is numbers, because they didn't know what teacher was in what room. They just looked at the little number outside.
Okay.
So there may have to be some investigation done as to, I don't remember what room 232 is.
Okay, and the only other question I have, when it comes to the cleanup, because I've done this before, you do plan on taking everything out that shows any type of contamination and replacing it with something new if we remodel or we go in and fix it. We're not going to leave anything that, say, has what you consider low PCBs, so we're going to leave it because sooner or later it's going to be bad PCBs as it continues to break down in the future.
Are you talking about the long term?
Yes. I'm saying if we decide to spend the money and go in, because you're saying it's on the glue with the ceiling tiles, so you're going to have to replace those. You're going to have to clean it. Is it in, I know we discussed earlier, is it possibility of in the cement that we put the tiles on? We don't know. If it is, can we clean out the cement without having to replace it? Is this something that, is there a chemical or high temperature steam, per se? I mean, this is just an example, that can clean it out without replacing the actual core of the school, but we're not going to leave, say, something that right now we considered low PCBs because sooner or later in the future it's going to continue to break down and the whole thing can happen all over again.
If anything gets left in the school that has any PCBs that we've identified, all right, we went
Right,
looking,
exactly.
we
So you're
found
going
it.
through the whole school. We
Right.
know what should or shouldn't have
If
it.
we find it, we have to work with the EPA to see what they will let us do. For example, when we first found it around the windows, we did test the cement to see how far it had gone into
Right.
it, how far away from the
Right.
window. So when we're talking about windows, originally, when we're in that frame of mind, we'll just take out the windows, the cement. And so what we did is we were thinking of making a groove, cutting out the cement, and then replacing the cement. But like you said, if it's just about everywhere, we would have to think
Where are we gonna stop?
a different way. Well, we would have to think a different way, which part of it may be encapsulation, which would be to seal it off.
But you can't seal it off forever. So my question is,
Well, and that's where the EPA demands would not let us go through this process unless we had a plan to not only encapsulate it now, but continually test and test again
Right.
and re-encapsulate.
so at that point,
and
if it
for
gets
here
that bad
till-
throughout the school, where say there's a large portion of the school that you would have to encapsulate or you think you would have to encapsulate, obviously it would probably go toward building a new school if it gets that bad. If it gets that bad, I mean, it's a matter of money. I know it always comes down to that. You know, what's going to cost us more? Is it going to cost us more to remodel and fix this, and half the school's useless, or is it going to cost us more to knock it down and build something new? And will that release more carcinogens into the air because you're knocking it down?
Well, to be honest, let me put it this way. I don't have answers for that now, because that's why I said that's long-term. That's why town, community, EPA, MSBA, all
But I'm
these
saying,
people-
is that something that will happen in the next year?
Oh, yeah.
So that your long-term is within the next year?
Yes. Well, long-term is make the decision within this year if we
Okay.
can figure a way to survive the year.
So next
where
year
we're
we
gonna
might
send
have
it-
the same problem, is my question.
Well, it depends. If we can figure out that we can remodel and refurbish over the next summer,
We're
if
good.
that's even possible, we
Right.
don't know that, then maybe it's just a year problem.
Okay.
If we decide that, like you said, it may be too expensive to go the route of encapsulation and continually cleaning or the refurbishing, and we decide to go build, whatever we do is going to be for a few years, because, I don't know if you've seen schools, but they take a couple of years to build. So it would be a couple of years out.
Now, for the board who's cleaning, I'm not sure which one of you is in charge of that. Can you clean and, say, disinfect the masonry without replacing it? Is that possible? Because the majority of the school is masonry. That's the core of it.
Yeah, Ross Hartman, I'm with Triumvirate Environmental. It's a good question, and there are some technologies out there that can be used to try to reduce levels of PCBs in concrete once they've got in. But right now, I don't think there's enough data for us to really make a determination
As to what, whether it can be done or whether
as
it's affordable?
to the extent of the contamination that's in any of the substrate. So you may have.
So we haven't tested enough of behind the ceiling panels?
Or we haven't gotten the data back yet. So,
Oh, okay.
and Bob at Fuss and O'Neill is the one taking that data. So, but from our, I guess my standpoint, and what we've done in the past, we felt that if the data came back, positive on some of the things that we've done over the past few days, that we would have the necessary amount of people and the capability to decon the school for it to try to be open at the beginning of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Richard Stang. I have a child going into the elementary school and one coming into Maycomber. What year was the middle school built?
68, 69,
What year was the elementary school built?
78,
And Maycomber?
50 some.
So
There's a new part to it too.
are they relative enough same vintage that one could conclude that you have similar problems in those schools as well?